welcome, first of all, to our Connect Reading Sustainability Showcase. We're just letting a few more people come into the waiting room. So as we do, what we'll do is we'll just go around and introduce our panelists. For those of you who are just joining us, we are recording the event so that we can make sure we are able to continually learn from the gems of wisdom that are shared this morning, midday, this afternoon, and so that we can come back to them and reshare the bits that we learn as we go throughout this 45 minutes. So firstly, I'm Lorraine, I'm the MD of Connect Reading, and I'm very, very glad to be able to be here to host the showing off of our wondrous Connect Reading members. I'm going to pass over to Luke from the University of Reading as he introduces himself.
Hi, I'm Luke Cantello. I'm the Energy Officer at the University of Reading. I'm part of a kind of 9-people team at the university, mainly within the area of the operations in terms of energy, recycling, travel, and engagement pieces. So that's me. Would you like me to introduce the next, or Lorraine, back to you?
Thank you. That's very kind. Yes, pick somebody who is speaking after you.
Tracy, would you like to come in and talk?
Sure, thanks, Luke. And we've never met, but I recognise your name. So I'm Tracy Rawling-Church. I'm chair of Connect Reading, but I'm also co-chair of the Reading Climate Change Partnership, and I'm the net zero lead for Thames Valley Berkshire LEP. And then my day job is I'm a sustainability consultant, so I'm spending a lot of time at the moment helping organisations develop net zero strategies. Would you like me to pass the baton, Lorraine? I can pass it to Tom McDonald.
Yeah, I'll take the baton. Hi, yeah, I'm Tom McDonald and I'm from Low Carbon Workspaces. So we're a grant scheme helping SMEs reduce their carbon emissions across quite a large part of the southeast, but I cover Berkshire, so I liaise with sort of stakeholders in the area, such as Tracy and Connect Reading, and then process applications that SMEs submit for grants in the area. So I'll pass now over to Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I run an organisation in Reading called Nature Nurture, and I'll be speaking shortly about that. Am I to speak now about that, or in a little bit, Lorraine?
We were just doing a quick run round of who's who
Okay.
as people arrive. Thank you. But I promise to make sure that you speak next. I promise. So to people who've just arrived, just to let you know, we are recording this so that we can learn from it as we go forwards and continue to take out the gems of wisdom that we hear throughout the afternoon. You are welcome to keep your cameras on because we'd love to see your faces. We'll be spotlighting the people who are speaking to us. And yes, indeed, Jed, would you be able to just show us what's happening as we go through this next 45 minutes? Thank you. So we have a full Connect Reading team this morning. We have 4 staff. We have Annie, myself, Jed and Darnish, and we have 2 of our trustees, 3 of our trustees now. So we have Vicky and Paul and Tracy as well. So this afternoon, why do I keep saying morning? Perhaps I haven't had enough coffee yet. I still feel like it's morning. We're going to hear from Natalie from Nature Nurture, and then Luke from the University of Reading, Tom from Low Carbon Workspaces, and then Tracy from Connect Reading, as well as her many other hats. We'll try and do a tiny bit of question and answer straight after Natalie, as she has to head into another meeting. But do feel free to ask questions after each showcase, even though we'll have the chance for a bit more discussion afterwards. Thanks, Jed. So Natalie, I promise you can go next. We're going to spotlight on you and take off the share screen and fire away.
Okay, hi everyone, good to be here. So I'm Natalie from Nature Nurture, an organisation I run in Reading that I set up around about 10 years ago. And the mission with what we do is really about connecting urban communities with the nature spaces on our doorstep. So based in Reading, and Reading is blessed with all these amazing parks and woodlands and waterways. I set up because I was just increasingly concerned about people's disconnection with the natural environment, and just had that sense of it being really good for us. And 2 real reasons I think we do what we do. Part of it is around supporting people's health and well-being, and based on the growing evidence base about being in the natural environment is really good for us. And the other reason around it is about nurturing custodians of the natural environment, which is obviously very important as well. And I'm really interested to see some of the research coming out of the University of Essex and University of Derby. It's that actually being immersed in the natural environment in itself leads to more pro-environmental behaviour. And I think that's something that Attenborough says as well, about how can we value the environment unless we've got that experience and that understanding of it. So in relation to climate change and climate action, I really believe that we can learn about these things out of the classroom environment. So we do a lot of work with schools and with communities where we're learning about the basics of ecology and our role in looking after the natural world, but we're doing that in the context of a woodland or a park. And I think as well, when we look at what's going on with the nature crisis and the climate crisis and the health crisis, I just feel what we're doing when we connect people with nature and we really encourage them to see these spaces in and around Reading as sort of like our shared garden. And if we see them like our shared garden, that's our sense of ownership of those spaces and our sense of let's all be a part of looking after those spaces. So a lot of work we do is in areas of deprivation in Reading. So in the D Park area, we do a lot in Louse Hill Copse. We team up with the conservation volunteers, and we have children as young as 3 coppicing and doing other sort of woodland management tasks. Do a lot of work with schools, sort of really nurturing teachers, helping them, upskilling them to take learning outside the classroom. And more recently, we've developed something called the Green Space Challenge. And so that's an offer to companies. So it's sort of partly your corporate social responsibility, but it's also very much about supporting your staff's health and well-being by being outdoors, but they're also doing something purposeful, something to sort of really look after the natural environment. So and we've got a specific event for families coming up this Sunday at Lavender Place Community Gardens in Reading, and that's called the Earth Action Challenge. And that sort of recognises it's about families and children, but it's trying to really nurture this sense of what sort of action you can take in your home, in your school, in your community. And it's trying to sort of recognizing there's a lot of eco-anxiety about, and how can we encourage that positive action and what people can do. But yeah, I think it's quite important to frame that in a positive sense, especially for young people. So yeah, just really keen to work with any schools, community groups and companies who want to, I think that dual thing of supporting well-being, but doing our support for the environment as well. Okay, thank you.
I was just reflecting a little bit about how you use the word connect, like so much in what you do, because it's connecting with nature. And we promised we didn't pay you to say that just because of our branding. I also wondered kind of what your reflections were about what happens when people don't connect with nature. So I know for our family during the beginning of lockdown last year, the walk out of the house into nature was our lifeline to sanity, well, a fraction of sanity maybe. And what have you seen as a result of COVID and the enforced relocalization of people in terms of the way that impacts their care for the environment?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think for a lot of people, I mean, sadly, when you look at the sort of evidence base, it's sad to see that I think people on lower socioeconomic backgrounds are less likely to connect with the natural environments. Although a lot of us were looking on and seeing how full the parks were, and we were talking about spending more time in our gardens and all that sort of thing, that wasn't the picture for everybody. So I think some of the schools we work with were very worried about the amount of time children were spending indoors and that anxiety about going out. But I think at the same time that there has been a really welcome shift to people recognizing the value of nature, and a lot of, certainly for myself, just visiting, I think it's that sense of the hyperlocal. I live very near Prospect Park, and the amount that was my sort of go-to space as we were allowed out that sort of once a day, and I just found that extremely beneficial to myself, and just seeing those sort of gradual changes of the seasons. And I just hope that growing recognition of nature and well-being, it's not an unusual thing to say nowadays, it's something that's sort of widely recognized. So I hope there's a positive shift there.
Thank you. The other thing I heard in what you were saying about nurturing custodians of our natural environment. So in terms of organisations, be that large institutions like the University of Reading, or as a parent at home, or in a small business, what can we do to get that phrase into the way that we think about how we work with other people and how we live in a space?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think we need to sort of shift into thinking about our natural spaces, as I mentioned before, as our sort of shared garden and our role in helping looking after those spaces. And also, there are a huge array of organisations in Reading, and we're very well networked. We partner together quite a lot. So if as a family or as a company, you want to sort of do your bit, there are a lot of organisations out there that you can work with when it comes, there's a growing amount of community gardens, so you can be involved in, and there's wonderful initiatives as well where there's community food growing, but where that food then gets distributed to some of the food banks that are sort of tackling food poverty. And there are numerous ways you can get involved. There's an organisation called Reading Green Wellbeing Network, and so that's a sort of umbrella of lots of organisations. So a good place to start would be Reading Voluntary Action, to see who's in your area. And as I say, there's a way in for families, for schools, for corporates, for everybody to get involved. And just bearing in mind that it's not just about giving to the environment. In doing that, you're really supporting your own health and well-being and that of your workers or your family.
I just wondered whether there was anything in terms of what's happening throughout the rest of the week for the festival, Tracy, that you would like to add to link into what Natalie's been saying. Although I do know you've had bandwidth issues, so you may not want to.
I think I can, as long as I don't sound like a dull.
Sorry,
it said you muted me then, Lorraine. I can, as long as I don't sound too much like a dull. I think you did it just as I unmuted myself, so we counteracted each other. I just wanted to draw attention to the wonderful event which Natalie and her team are hosting on Sunday the 25th at Lavender Place. So they're running an event for families with children aged 5 and upwards, called the Earth Action Challenge, which sounds amazing and is completely free. So do sign up for that if you have free time on Sunday.
I have already signed up to it for my children, I hasten to add. Although, I mean, I don't think she'd turn me away.
Oh, and you, it's a family thing.
Well, as a family, but as opposed to just turning up with some mates. I'm sure you wouldn't turn me away though, Natalie. I think you can tell.
No, I wouldn't.
A childish.
I mean, it's an absolutely incredible place to visit, just as an example of what can be done in terms of sustainable sort of food production in the heart of our town. It's quite an incredible place to visit anyway. So that garden, it's where the civic centre used to be, and it's just amazing. They've only got the space until it gets developed, but what they've done there is quite incredible. So
amazing. Thanks so much, Natalie. If we have people asking any questions, we promise to funnel them directly to you on LinkedIn in our member groups or by email. Make sure that we stay connected, but have a very good rest of your meeting. And we're going to move on to the University of Reading, which Natalie mentioned that she lived near to the Prospect Park. I live within a stone's throw of the University of Reading, and it has been my lifeline for a long time, not just during COVID. So we're going to hear from Luke, and you should be able to share your screen if you wish to.
Give me a moment to start sharing, and I will start talking at you for a few minutes with regards to kind of what the university is doing in terms of an operational point of view. As a team, I mentioned that we control kind of energy, recycling, travel in terms of the different modes, as well as kind of the engagement with our staff and students. And the university itself has recently come out with a new strategy, 6 core principles really, and sustainability has become one of those pillars of the principles of the university, which is, like many universities, the kind of direction that they tend to be going in with the climate crisis that's going on. And also the University of Reading, which I won't kind of go in too much detail because I'm not part of the research teams, but we have got members from the university on the IPCC network, and are also going up to Glasgow to represent as part of COP26. We will also be doing a lot of events between the 3rd and 5th of November with both our University of Reading Green Festival and our COP26 events that kind of intertwine between the two. I think I'll just follow on a bit from what's been said. I think some of the most important things that we think as a team and as a university are everyone taking small actions. And those small actions are the ones you can do without having to cost in terms of energy, time. One of those become symbiotic in your lifestyle. And that's from anything from, maybe it's just looking at where you buy your energy from. So as a university, we try and buy all of our energy from sustainable source, and it's also certificated that where that comes from. So for them people living at home, we'd recommend finding a company that can almost certify that your energy is coming from wind or hydro or solar locally, or at least finding a balance between that. Obviously, for us at the university, we'd like everyone to switch away from gas completely. Obviously, we know that people living in rural areas, they tend to be on gas, oil, which is even a more difficult kind of subject to cross. And even the university, we have a campus down at Greenland, which is on oil. And so we're looking at kind of interesting things about using the Thames to provide a heating network for the campus down there. It's a very expensive project, but there seems to be traction in kind of these kind of bespoke solutions to quite large sites, and planning, and also discussing with kind of biodiversity teams and stuff like that, the impacts they may not have, and about weighing up those kind of, how do we come up with solutions that don't impact the environment as highly. This kind of symbiosis, I kind of say, between we have issues, we've got to do something to change, but then every action has a positive and negative reaction. And so within that, we must kind of come up with the most happy medium, I believe personally. This includes our catering outlets have decided that they're going to remove all gas from them. They're going to go all electric. With that, we've had a fantastic opportunity. We bid for some money through the SALEX funding, which was the government's decarbonisation scheme. We managed to come out of that with about £2.3 million, which we have run a programme of new LED lighting at lots of our campus, catering, removing all their old ovens, and they're all electric. Some of the labs that we've worked with, they used to have cooking ovens for sterilizing their equipment, and they used to just leak heat, and we were like, crazy. So we've then, with that, bid for them to have brand new units that are custom sealed so that they can do that and use almost 40% less energy and save 60 or 80% heat from them. Fantastic. And I would highlight that any of the stuff that I'm saying here can be looked at on our website, which is www.reading.ac.uk/sustainability. And there is loads of information on there. You can even look at building by building consumption of energy. You can request data information if you want to scrutinize us a bit. You can see some of our solar generation online. You can read our policies. So we've just had our new waste strategy, our zero carbon plan, all put out there for people to come back and say, we think you're doing really well here, but have you thought about this or thought about that? We want to be as open, as transparent as we possibly can in the team and as a university. And coming back to some of the more nuances of things is about the university has probably seen itself on a global scale for quite a while, and is realizing that the local community and our engagement with the local community needs to go a bit further. We do partner with a great deal of number of associations, charities and stuff locally, but we think there could be more connection between the local communities about what we can do. Obviously, the lifeline between, as you mentioned, coming onto campus, we've just won our 10th green flag, so we know the site's wonderful. We even have a biodiversity strategy and a new biodiversity and green infrastructure work stream that's just been opened up as part of the university strategy. And we've got the Hedgehog Society who've just started up, which if you follow their Twitter link is great. They do bits of paper on the floor that they leave overnight with ink pads all the way around them. And then in the morning they come back and find out all of these little paws of foxes and hedgehogs. I think it's great. I'm a massive sado on bugs and stuff. I've got a hedgehog living under my shed in the garden. Love it. Yes, loads of stuff going on. Sure, there's millions of questions, and I will leave it there because otherwise I'll go on forever.
Thanks, Luke. I love how passionate you are about it and just the array of things that there are that people can do. We'll try and capture more of the questions at the end, but again, I just wanted to give a chance to link back into any of the other events or wisdom that Tracy might want to share from Reading Climate Change Festival and the network as well.
That's really kind. Thank you, Lorraine. I mean, I think Luke gave a really good overview of what's being done kind of on the university campus in its buildings and infrastructure to reduce its carbon emissions. But obviously, Reading University is renowned for the quality of its climate science. And so we do have a number of talks going on at the Climate Festival where we have leading climate change academics explaining things in an accessible way. But what I really wanted to draw attention to was a new course that's just been launched, which was developed on the Future Learn platform by Reading University, but it's developed by young people for young people. And so, you know, really important to make sure that we talk to young people in their own language about climate change. So I'm just going to pop the link for that in the comments in a second. And Luke's got his hand up now.
Fire away.
I'd just like to add, we've added to that training platform. So there's a bit from us as well about what we think is important and what we're doing. So yes, a very good overview. And I've put the events that are kind of University of Reading in the chat for everyone to have a look at.
Amazing, thank you, much appreciated. And Tracy, I think, will share the other links to those as well. So next up we have Tom, who is from Low Carbon Workspaces, and he's going to share some of the things that you can all encourage your organisations to take part in. And the best news about this bit is there are lots of small things we can all do, but these are some maybe medium-sized things that you can do and have some financial support to do it too. So over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got some slides to share, so I'll just grab those up. All good? Is that working? Yes. Yeah. So hi. Yeah. As would have introduced, yeah, I'm Tom. I'm from Low Carbon Workspaces. So we're a grant scheme, and we help SMEs to lower their carbon emissions. I will say that we're part of a larger organisation called Engage Solutions, and we have made the SME climate commitment through Engage Solutions. So that's half emissions by 2030, net zero before 2050, and report on your annual progress. So that's important for all SMEs to do. But I think our greatest contribution really to cutting carbon emissions is through the way that we help other organisations to do that. So it's not quite it's not direct action, but we're helping others to make that direct action. So just quickly go over how we do that, and then also got a couple of case studies of businesses that we've worked with who have been able to cut their annual carbon emissions due to projects that we've helped to fund. Yeah, so we go. So yeah, as I say, we help SMEs to cut their annual carbon emissions, lower their environmental impact, and save on the monthly overheads. We do this with grants and energy saving advice. So grants are awarded for upgrades to equipment that reduce energy consumption on site, or generate emissions generated on site. And we also give businesses what's called a green diagnostic, which is effectively advice for things they could do additional to what what they've had done as their projects. So if they were getting, for example, LED lights, but they hadn't upgraded their heating system, or they could install solar panels, we'd advise them on that, and to further reduce their carbon emissions annually. And as you can see on the screen, since we began in 2007, we've helped SMEs to save 2,700 tons of carbon emissions per year, which, to put into some kind of context, is enough CO2 to carbonate nearly 500 million cola bottles. Just for that into a little bit of context there. And we cover a wide range of interventions. The four there are sort of the most common interventions that we cover. We also always look to fund unique projects such as ozone generators, waste balers, and even diamond coating machines to increase the efficiency of the diamond coating process at a manufacturing business. So yeah, I'll now go through just a couple of businesses who we've helped over the last year or so to reduce their carbon emissions. So the first one is Westies Dry Cleaners, and by the name, they are a dry cleaning service based in Maidenhead. So they had an old inefficient steam boiler, which they used to generate steam to clean their clothes. This was a 40-plus-year-old boiler, which was highly inefficient, very old. Realistically, a boiler shouldn't really be more than 15 years old, because they start to really degrade in their efficiency and waste a lot of gas. And obviously, as we've heard, gas is not the best thing. So the less gas you can use, the better. So while we often fund boiler upgrades, normally they're for central heating systems, whereas this was a bit different, because the steam that is the boiler produces steam to actually clean the clothes. So a grant helped them to not only reduce their carbon footprint, but also allowed them to continue providing their cleaning service. And they say 2.2 tons of carbon per year, which is not enough to carbonate 500 million cola bottles, but is about the weight of a rhino, which would be something that we provide as like a saving certificate, so people can show how much they've saved. And we usually contextualize that with the weight of a specific animal. And in Westie's case, it was a rhino. And the second and final case study I'd like to show you is HiFi Cinema. So while Westie's project helped them to reduce the amount of gas they use each year, this project was to install a solar PV array, which meant that even if HiFi Cinema didn't reduce the amount of energy that they were using, the electricity they did use was generated in a more sustainable way. So much like purchasing fully sustainable electricity from your supplier, if you can generate your own electricity on site from a solar PV array, that's just as good. So Alan, the owner, had installed a solar array in his house, and with grant funding, he tried to achieve the same for his business. In a seamless plug here, Alan will be joining me on Thursday to discuss this project at our Climate Festival event, so I can pop that in the chat for anyone who'd like to come there on Thursday. And encouragingly, solar panels have actually increased by 1,300% in popularity across the scheme, from our first round of funding to our second. So that's very promising that lots of SMEs are trying to generate their own on-site electricity, as well as the environmental impacts that has. It's obviously safeguards them from energy price hikes, and allows them to, if they generate additional electricity, they can export that to the grid as well. So I know that I was asked to bring across a tip for action to reduce your climate impact, and I think the main thing is to just think about things being on, thinking about it and having it in the forefront of your mind. So changes to behavioral changes at business can actually reduce energy usage by around 30%. Just thinking about turning things off, not leaving things on standby, even something simple like if you're working from home, or even if you're working in an office, and not filling the kettle to the top, because kettles are quite high wattage appliances. So if you just fill them to, if you need a cup or 2 cups, instead of filling it all the way, you waste quite a lot of energy by leaving the kettle boiling to a higher amount than you need it. So yeah, I look forward to engaging with Connect Reading more, because we've just recently taken out our membership, and hopefully see people again at the networking events coming up. Thanks.
Thanks ever so much, Tom. Luke had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm being a bit cruel here as well.
Okay.
Where do you see, obviously updating a gas boiler, where do you see gas in the next 10 to 15 years as still in market, or do you feel like that you will shift lots of companies towards electric?
Yeah, I think we will be, sorry.
Are you forward thinking that far towards the 2030, 2050?
Yes, that is something that we are thinking about. We try to encourage people to upgrade to electric systems if it's not something they've considered. If they haven't come to us specifically to do a boiler, and that's not like set in there, if they're not set on replacing the gas boiler with another gas boiler, we would advise to change something like, especially in warehouses, things like infrared heating. A massive reduction in energy can be achieved through systems like that.
And then what sorts of systems would you recommend? And I say that because I would have a few my own suggestion, but what might your company suggest as alternatives?
It would depend on the specific type of building. So for, as I say, for warehouses and bigger areas, you may want infrared heating. Electric boilers are an option, but they are at the moment probably a bit more expensive to run than a gas boiler. And that's for business. Obviously, the incentive is quite often not always environmental. It is sometimes purely environmental, but sometimes it's the cost is a factor. Heat pumps, which used to be covered by the RHI, we now cover because we couldn't work together with that. Now that's something that we can fund because people can't have it like the commercial RHI. So things like that are definitely something that we would suggest.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
And thank you for putting people on the spot. It's always more fun that way. I'm going to hand over to Tracy, and we'll kind of thread some of these things together. But she will thread better than I, as she is an environmental guru. But I do just want to say I'm going to make my husband watch this later, because I bang on about only filling the kettle a certain amount all the time. You know, 8 years of marriage and still working on it. Tracy, over to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. If you can just keep me to time, I'd really appreciate it, because I can very easily spend all day talking about this stuff, and that's probably not what your delegates want. So yeah, really great to hear from Tom. And again, Tom and I already know each other, but I think it's really worth saying about the low carbon workspaces grants, how very easy they are to access. So I know there was a lot of furore about the Green Deal that was launched for homeowners because it was ridiculously long-winded and difficult to access the money. But actually, the low carbon workspaces grant system is really efficient and doesn't take very long, doesn't cause a lot of admin. So definitely worth looking at if you kind of run your own infrastructure. And I think that's the challenge for a lot, particularly of SMEs. Obviously, the university is in the fortunate position of owning its estate and therefore having full control over the heating, lighting, ventilation, energy sourcing, what have you. An awful lot of SMEs are tenants in other people's building and don't buy their own electricity and don't control how the building is run. So as part of the work that I'm doing with the Thames Valley Berkshire LEP, we actually had a meeting last week with Bays where they were just trying to find out what was needed to try and unlock carbon savings in business. And along with a number of the other delegates in the meeting, I was advocating really strongly for work to be done on trying to get commercial landlords on board with developing low carbon interventions for the buildings that they run. So hopefully that might have some influence. London today has actually got parts at the Climate Festival. That just kind of shows how well connected it is with the town, so that's really good. I just wanted the opportunity to maybe showcase a few other things that are going on outside the town that we could access and that might be useful to us in our work. And I know that obviously the members of Connect Reading are a very broad church in that some of us are businesses, some are charities, some are schools, faith groups, etc. So I just wanted to highlight a few other things that are going on, and actually what these things serve to do, I think, is to showcase just how mainstream now the attention on climate change is becoming. So I don't know how many of you follow football. I actually don't, but I do follow the environment. So I noticed that just this weekend we had the first net zero Premier League football match, which brings the idea of net zero to an entirely new audience. And there's also a short film produced by Sky that features Jamie Redknapp and Mark Wright, sharing tips on how to reduce your carbon footprint. So I really love the idea that communities of interest around a completely different topic are now beginning to bring climate change into their dialogue with their stakeholders, which means that we're not talking to ourselves in an echo chamber all the time, which can easily happen. And the other thing that's just happened is there's a Together for Our Planet framework, which has been developed alongside the COP26 conference, and that contains toolkits for specific groups, and it already had toolkits for businesses, schools and local authorities, and they've now just released a toolkit specifically for faith, religion and belief groups. And we also have a couple of talks at the Climate Festival that are for faith groups. So we've got a talk about Forest Church, and we've got another about raising climate change awareness for faith groups. So new audiences. I suppose my own work is primarily with businesses. My day job at Aclara Advisory is as a sustainability consultant. So I help organisations to develop their own sustainability strategies. And at the moment, there's a lot of interest in the idea of net zero. And quite a lot of misunderstanding about what net zero means as well, because it's not always that clear. So I'm actually hosting an event during the festival on Friday afternoon that aims to demystify that. But I'm also going to suggest to Lorraine that after this event, we just send out some links to some of the excellent tools that are available to support companies who want to understand what it means and what they can do. And even if you are not in your owned building and you don't have control over everything, things like turning off your office appliances when you're not using them, not boiling a full kettle, for example, these things do actually make a difference. And the beauty of doing anything that involves reducing your energy consumption is it will actually save you money as well. So it's going to be good, it's going to be good for your bottom line regardless. So there are some great resources on the Reading Can website for both organisations and individuals on kind of hints and tips on what you can do. And then finally, for anyone who finds that climate change provokes feelings of anxiety and would like a safe place to discuss those, I'm also hosting Reading's first ever climate cafe next Sunday morning, which will be at the Reading Biscuit Factory. So that's just an opportunity to grab a coffee and have a facilitated conversation about, what it means and what we can do about it and how it makes us feel. So I hope that's been helpful. Thanks a lot, Lorraine.
Amazing, super helpful. I think that's one of the things that I have really found interesting is watching those conversations bubble up in different spaces, because you do sort of expect almost like communities to coalesce around their own thing. And actually, I think if anything, climate change well, it's everybody's problem, obviously, but for people to really wake up and there's been a lot around that, especially our young people, I think have been very, very good at kicking us into play of having to take notice because of the level of activity that they've had on our screens, in our homes, and on the greater political psyche. So we have 5 minutes for any questions. If people want to stick them in the chat, feel free, or just pop up, because this is not a sort of a one-way show, and if not, I'm happy to kind of put all these things in the chat, and then we'll make these available. We'll share this online if people are thinking they've missed something and they thought that thing they said at 2 minutes in, I just can't remember. We'll make sure that all the resources are there and send those out, as Tracy said. But has anybody got any questions for, frankly, anyone, but probably mostly Luke, Tom and Tracy? Or would anyone like to see Tom and Tracy do the same dance as Luke? That's awesome.
I'd just like to start a discussion then about eco-anxiety, actually. I think it started to crop up quite a bit during and through COVID, as does health trump sustainability? And how people feel about that. As a clinically vulnerable person myself, I try and balance the two, and I think I do quite a good job of doing it. But there are some hand washing, using wipes, throwing things away because they touch maybe something that's not quite, let's burn it because it's not, I can't recycle it because it's may got diseases or stuff on it. Anyone want to kind of jump in on that as a kind of, yeah.
I've got a kind of related observation, Luke, and I think that's a very valid point, is that there's been whole new waste streams created by the pandemic, and that's another problem that we've now got to deal with. But also I think that, you know, there's a difference between an existential threat that's acute, like a pandemic, and an existential threat like climate change, which is chronic. And so which creeps up on you. It's the kind of boiling a frog thing where you don't notice until it's too late to jump out the pot. And I mean, every year in the UK, more than 40,000 people die from poor air quality as a direct result of environmental pollution, but it's not in the headlines. When we reached 40,000 deaths from the pandemic, it felt like a massive figure and everyone was quite rightly horrified. But all these other excess deaths that are caused by environmental pollution don't get noticed. We also will suffer excess deaths as a result of extreme temperatures as a result of climate change. And then there's also the kind of immediate threat to life of things like flooding. And also, the loss of your livelihood or your home due to flooding can be a massively traumatic and disruptive event in anyone's life. So I think there is a real human cost associated with climate change that we do need to take very seriously. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think having that health debate is really important. And that's why in the Climate Change Partnership, which runs Reading's climate emergency strategy, although it's not as well developed as the other things because it was introduced later, we do have a specific theme dedicated to health, because actually it's a fundamental part of the impacts.
Of course, and quite nicely that you kind of highlight on a few bits there. But then does publicising the deaths through what are kind of the climate crisis issue, does that then push eco-anxiety even further onto people going, I'm going to die of heat exhaustion, oh, I'm going to get flooded out of my house, all these things that then start creating even, and then the feeling of I can't do anything about it. But this idea that we all talk about taking simple actions altogether accumulate seems to just dissipate in the kind of, and maybe that's because those things aren't being put out in the media as much. It's the scare stories that go out, not the actions about how we do it, how we,
I think
I understand completely the medical things about the new waste streams, as I have to go into the hospital quite a bit. The volume of clinical waste that goes to incineration is mental, but I understand why that has to happen. But yeah, do we start insetting, offsetting carbon capture technologies? Do they come into play to try and facilitate those? Because there will always be that amount of stuff that needs doing. Do we see a massive shift in the ways NHS and medical waste is treated or created in the first place?
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point about kind of systemic change, because the way that we do things, the way that we carry out the kind of processes that support keeping society running needs to be revisited. And we do need to think about not just using resources more efficiently, but trying maybe, if you can capture the energy from incinerating medical waste and then use it for something, then at least that helps to offset some of the impacts. And I think it's absolutely true that it's no good just outlining the problem to everybody and scaring them to death. What you need to do is make it really easy to act, and provide the tools to help people to act, and just facilitate that whole process of behaviour change, because people do want to do something, but they often don't know what to do or how to do it. And I think supporting them with that is probably the most helpful thing we can do.
Amazing, thank you. I've just seen there's one extra thing from alumni at Reading School. We're looking at effective ways in teaching students about the climate crisis whilst being mindful of the anxiety that it may cause. And I think that's the key, isn't it? It's balancing facts and some of them are frankly petrifying, with solutions that everyone can get involved in. And that starts from what Natalie was talking about at the very beginning, about how do we educate an entire generation of the precious way that nature brings benefit, not just because we want to sort of milk it for all it's worth, but because we need to sustain humanity, and the environment is part and parcel of that, right through to what do we do as we change our behaviours as we get older. What does that mean for our business life, our personal life, our home life? Turn the kettle off when it's, you know, starting to boil. It doesn't have to boil it to high heaven, and making sure that we use what we need, not just everything because it's available to us in the first world. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I've had to relearn as I've got older and older.